Mr. Fluff and the Tall Tower by David Brandt. Illustrations by Olga Lavrova. Read by the author. A lovely day. The sun was all Mr. Fluff cared about that day. He lay on his back near his favorite-smelling Bradford pear tree as the sun warmed his belly. It painted a lovely shadow picture of the rust-colored leaves and mossy branches. He was enjoying the song, a duet, actually, as two northern cardinals sang back and forth to each other from the tree. Two little girls whom he knew came by with a small shopping cart, and he jumped in. They strolled around the neighborhood for the rest of the afternoon. He imagined it might be May. He could not be sure, though, as cats do not have a good understanding of things like months, days, and time. All he knew was that it was a lovely time to enjoy a wagon ride on a lovely day. And that is all he needed to know. A frantic scene. Mr. Fluff awoke to a loud clatter. He got up, stretched his body out very, very slowly, and let out a big yawn. As he walked down the stairs, he opened his eyes wide at what he saw. There seemed to be hundreds of cardboard boxes stacked by the front door. It looked like a cardboard castle. He recalled that Ian and Genevieve had been busy stuffing all kinds of things into boxes for a while now. The boxes were so much fun to play in, and Mr. Fluff believed that Ian and Genevieve had given them to him as a gift. But now that he faced the gigantic cardboard castle, he understood that he must have been wrong. Ian bent down on his knee. "Are you ready to go, Mr. Fluff?" he said. "It's going to be a long day." Genevieve called out, "Ready to go for a ride in the car?" Mr. Fluff was definitely not ready for a ride in the car. The car was terrifying and made him feel sick. "Meow, meow," he complained, but they didn't seem to care about his feelings and put him in the car anyway. They drove away from his house and past many other houses. Soon he didn't see houses or grass or trees anymore. Then the car stopped. Gazing out the back window, he saw many other cars had also stopped, as many people walked very quickly in front of them. "We're here, or should we say, we're home," Genevieve said, laughing. Mr. Fluff was confused. They already had a home. In fact, shouldn't they turn the car around and go back home right now? "No," Mr. Fluff groused. He looked up and saw the tallest tower he had ever seen. Through the haze, it looked like it kept going up, up, up forever into the clouds. He could see birds flying around the top of the tower. Outside the car, the rain beat down angrily on the pavement. Some of the cars were making very noisy honking sounds. What is this place? He wondered cautiously. This was turning out to be a horrible day. The Tall Tower. Mr. Fluff, come on, it's time for dinner," Genevieve called out from the small kitchen in the new apartment. Mr. Fluff was quite confused. As he walked slowly to the kitchen, he told Genevieve how he felt about this new home. "Ma, oh, ma." "I know, Mr. Fluff," Genevieve sighed. "We're all tired from the big move. Things are going to be very different here. We can't let you go outside the apartment. Animals are not allowed to roam freely around the building, you know," she said with a chuckle. "That's not right," Mr. Fluff complained. "I'm an outside cat. How am I supposed to hunt birds all the way up here?" Genevieve smiled. "I know you're not too happy right now, Mr. Fluff, but you'll get used to it," she said as she rubbed Mr. Fluff's head gently. Mr. Fluff shrugged and walked over to the window and looked down. What he saw made his eyes almost pop out of his head. The trucks, the people, the dogs, they all looked so small. He realized he was somehow higher than any tree he had ever climbed. Well, this was kind of interesting. He enjoyed looking down at all the things happening on the street below because he could see so many things at once. A bird flew by and took a seat on a nearby window. Mr. Fluff and the bird looked at each other for a long time. Soon, the setting sun started to warm his paws on the windowsill. The warmth felt very nice and quite familiar. I don't understand why I'm in this tall tower. Being up here is okay, but I miss my home and I don't know if I will be happy here. Mr. Fluff sighed. He hoped Ian and Genevieve made a wise decision coming here. So far, it seemed like a pretty boring place. The Great Escape. It seemed like a long time went by. As we said before, cats really can't tell time or days or months, but Mr. Fluff was sure it had been quite a long time because it had begun to snow outside. He had gotten a bit more used to his new life in the tall tower. At least it was safe and dry. He remembered the strange and icy feeling of cautiously dipping his paws into the snow at his old home. At least I haven't seen any wild dogs here so far, he thought with a shiver. Once, 2 wild dogs had tried to attack him while he was playing in the snow. They chased him until he managed to climb up a tree. Still, he truly missed the different seasons at his old home. The long days in April where he would just get lost in a field somewhere and take a nap deep inside a pink and yellow spice bush. He was free to roam around the neighborhood because there weren't rules against it like where he was now. Mr. Fluff sighed. Suddenly, he noticed a ray of light streaming from the front door of the apartment. Ian had not closed the door all the way when he ran out. Mr. Fluff was a cautious but adventurous cat. I have no idea what's out there in that hallway. Wild dogs, perhaps. Suddenly, his nose twitched. He smelled something very good. He did not know what it was, but it smelled sweet and also spicy. He pushed his head into the crack and opened the door. He was out. Outside, but still inside. Mr. Fluff crept slowly along the hallway. There were many doors. He realized that he was not actually outside. He was outside of the apartment, but actually still inside the tall tower. He wasn't really outside at all. No grass, no trees, no birds. He sniffed under a door. Dog. Definitely dog, he thought, and walked on. Down the hall, someone was cooking bacon. He thought about turning back. He thought about what Genevieve said. Animals were not allowed to roam the building alone. He thought about this for a moment. Well, he thought, I'm certainly not an animal. I'm a cat. And he decided to keep exploring. He trotted down to the other end of the hallway where the sweet but spicy smell was coming from. One of the doors had a sign on it that said, "Welcome." Mr. Fluff decided to smell under that door to see what he could learn. He wondered if someone who lived there was willing to share their food. He sang sweetly. The door slowly opened. Learning to knit. "Why, hello," said a gray-haired woman in a winter coat and hat as she looked down at Mr. Fluff with a smile. "Where on earth did you come from?" "Me," Mr. Fluff replied, glad to have found a new friend. He rubbed up against her leg. I was just about to go out for groceries, but I have a feeling you are hungry and need something to eat. Mr. Fluff was always hungry and always wanted something to eat. No, he agreed. Let's see, what do I have for you? She took a small carton of milk out, poured some into a very small bowl, and set it in front of Mr. Fluff. Mr. Fluff sniffed it, took a lick, and turned his head away. Oh, I see, she said. You don't like milk. There was no way she could have known, but Mr. Fluff was lactose intolerant. What else do I have here? She said. I wonder, maybe some of this pastrami. She took one of the slices of pastrami out of the small bag. Then she took a knife and chopped it up into tiny pieces and put it on a pretty plate. Mr. Fluff loved the delicious meat with a salty, spicy flavor. He decided pastrami was his new favorite food. Taking off her coat, she said, Well, I'm glad you like pastrami. It was my husband's favorite. My name is Carol, by the way. What's your name? She said, stroking the top of his head gently. Mr. Fluff said. Carol laughed. Well, I guess I will have to think of one for you. Mr. Fluff did not want a new name, but he did want more pastrami. Would you like to help me with my knitting? I'm making a sweater for my daughter's new baby. Mr. Fluff grabbed one end of the yarn in his mouth. Knitting is fun, he said, playing with the yarn. So Carol and Mr. Fluff sat for a long time, knitting. Suddenly, he jumped off Carol's lap, walked to the front door, and began rubbing his head against it. Do you have somewhere you want to go, Kitty? I don't even know what to call you. You look like a sunrise to me, so I'm going to call you Sunny. Said Mr. Fluff as he tapped his paw against the door. Well, I see you really do want to go out. Okay. Carol opened the door, and with a burst of energy, Mr. Fluff ran out. He ran all the way back to his apartment. When he looked back, he saw Carol standing in her doorway with a sweet smile. He blinked his eyes at her slowly. That is a way that cats say I love you. And he meowed goodbye. Back home. With a loud rumble, the door to Mr. Fluff's apartment sprang open. What on earth is going on here? Said Ian. Mr. Fluff, how did you get out of the apartment? We thought you were curled up in a closet somewhere. No, said Mr. Fluff as he walked back into his house, giving Ian a nice head bump on the way in. Genevieve shouted from across the apartment. Is that Mr. Fluff? I thought he was napping in a closet. Time for dinner. Mr. Fluff happily walked over to his food bowl. He wasn't very hungry anymore, but he never was one to refuse food of any kind. He settled down in one of his favorite beds. Mr. Fluff has always had many beds. The bed where Ian and Genevieve sleep, his cat hammock in the office, any patch of grass, the laundry pile, the couch, and the rug outside Ian and Genevieve's room. Tonight seemed the perfect place for the cat hammock. As he settled down to sleep, he thought about the adventure he had had that day. Carol was certainly nice. Maybe living in this apartment will be nice after all. There aren't a lot of mice to chase or birds to catch, but there is good food here, and meeting new people is always fun. Soon he was asleep. He dreamt that he was resting in the grass at his old home. From his spot near the front door of the house, he could keep a good eye on things going on around him. Two birds in the tree loudly chirped to each other. A boy whizzed by on a bicycle. The sun warmed him. It was a great day. This has been Mr. Fluff and the Tall Tower by David Brandt with illustrations by Olga Lavrova, read by David Brandt, published by Coleman Press.